everybody understands the world in their own way, but I sort of like to understand things at a molecular biological level if I can. Biohacking and functional medicine have a lot in common. Functional medicine is looking at the why, not just the symptoms, for various. But that's more about treating diseases, and biohacking is more about being better than well, optimization.
You're listening to the Optimal Performance Podcast, and I'm your host, Sean McCormick. It's the OPP. I'm a performance coach, a wellness entrepreneur, a blogger, a speaker, a biohacker, and it's my privilege to bring to you the leading experts in the field of performance. So let's dig right in. You're listening to the Optimal Performance Podcast. The OPP is brought to you by Natural Stacks, makers of 100% natural and open source supplements designed to help you live optimal. For more information on how to build optimal mental and physical performance into your life, go to naturalstacks.com. And as always, please share this with the people that you love and the people that you care for. It's my goal to make this as rich a resource as possible for you and as an accessible tool for you guys to be better and be more and do more in your life. So if you dig it, share it. As always, every episode is followed up with a blog post with detailed notes about some of the things that we're talking about. So always feel free to go to naturalstacks.com and follow up there. I'm really excited for our guest today, none other than Abelard Lindsay. He's been with Natural Stacks since literally day one, before day one, and is pivotal in developing the stacks that you love to take so frequently, that I love to take so frequently. Today we're going to talk about acetylcholine brain food, but before we get into that, we're going to dive right into the conversation.
Hey, great to be here.
Abelard, tell everybody your exact location right now. Rub it in.
Oh gosh, I don't want to. I'm on vacation. Let's just say that.
There you go.
Yeah, this interview was pushed back a few days, so it went into my vacation. So now I'm working on vacation, or I could say I'm a digital nomad if I want to be more glamorous.
I like that a lot.
I won't rub it in.
Nice. So we'll start out here. We've talked a little bit before we turned the recorder on, and we're going to talk specifically about the acetylcholine brain food product that I've been taking a lot lately. And but again, before we dig into that, Abelard, would you mind sharing? I'm just dying to know what stacks did you take today? How many of what are you on right now?
Okay. Well, I took acetylcholine brain food, of course. I took 3 of those, and then I took 1 serotonin brain food because I'm in a pretty good mood. I don't need to enhance that so much. I took 1 GABA brain food because I'm not going to sleep, or I don't want to be too relaxed and social. But I just want to ease of my nervousness or stage fright or whatever. And I took dopamine brain food, the equivalent of about 3 pills. And I also took some paracetam. I took 1.6 grams. So that's that's my baseline. And CILTEP, of course, 3 pills and a cup of coffee.
Nice. Very cool.
Yeah.
Nothing else? No other weird roots or any tree barks that you found anywhere or anything like that?
Well, I'm when I have to go in for an interview or something like that, I usually don't try any of the more esoteric supplements. For instance, if I took Kana, Zembrin, with forskolin, that's really good for researching, but it makes me not like people. So it makes me want to watch math lectures all day and not talk to anybody. People become really annoying. So that's one I wouldn't take, even though it's good for researching.
Well, thank you for not taking that today, my friend. Right. I don't want you to take the people are annoying stack when we're
right. Just leave me to my studying.
That's good. There's a time and a place. I could use some more of that, I suppose.
Yeah.
So I want to start with a couple of really simple questions about the acetylcholine brain food. How is acetylcholine brain food different from in the most simplest way to explain, how is acetylcholine brain food different from GABA or serotonin or the dopamine brain food products?
Yeah. Well, cognition is not a one-dimensional thing. It's not it can be explained by one number. There's a lot of different things going on in the brain. So, for instance, dopamine is related to motivation, following through on goals, drive, and serotonin is more about mood and feelings of happiness and contentment. And GABA is about inhibitory activity in the brain and emotional labor. It's good for social interaction. It makes thoughts in the brain take more time to manifest themselves, so it decreases the amount of chatter in the brain. It makes it's like a squelch knob. It's essentially for the brain, making it so that only the really intense signals can manifest. And acetylcholine, though, is for creativity, focus, and alertness. It's very low when it's sleeping, but as it gets higher and higher in REM sleep, there's more acetylcholine. And then when awake, it's much higher, and then it's enhanced in extreme levels of alertness. So it's being totally awake and alert versus being asleep and in deep sleep, not even dreaming. So it's a continuum along that. It also helps with creativity because it lets me. I mean, it's hard to measure creativity scientifically in an animal model, but so it's kind of a subjective observation. But it helps me maintain my thought train for a longer period of time, so I can develop thoughts, and that helps with my creativity. So those are essentially the differences. So there's these four axes I've described of cognition, and there's there's probably several more that could be discovered, I imagine. So that's essentially it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd love to share kind of my experience with it, because I've been taking CILTEP for years now. Not every day. I usually take it 4 or 5 days a week. And then the other brain food products, I sort of pick and choose depending on what my load is for the day, what I'm up to. And I've experienced with the racetams. I got away from them for before I found natural stacks, or specifically CILTEP. I was taking the racetams, and I've tinkered around with different blends and stuff like that. But for me, what I love about the acetylcholine is creativity, for sure. It noticeably, almost like this novelty dial, like dialing up your ability to recognize novelty, to create novelty, to express yourself in a way that is new or unique or clear. And I think of it as like almost like a katana. The acetylcholine brain food is very sharp, it's very nimble, and it's very specific. What I found that, like, I don't know if you listened to the episode that I did with Frank Yosa from Ketone Aid, but I talked about his the ketone esters as like as an increase in sharpness, and just from being in high millimolar range of ketosis. With acetylcholine, the brain food product, it acts quickly, and it also is very sharp, and the creativity is noticeable. So I don't know. I felt like I wanted to share that with you. Do you get feedback? Do you hear people? Do you read reviews and watch all that stuff to kind of see what people think about it?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
I pay attention to that very closely. One thing also is since acetylcholine is very involved in muscle contraction, I find it makes me feel more coordinated and more aware of my body and my movements, and it also increases the interest in visual things. For example, if I look at like flowers or people's faces, or complicated things like that, I see more. There's more input. It feels like it's higher resolution, and music sounds more interesting. That's that's related to the difference between being completely asleep, where you're not having any input from outside sources, to being fully awake and aware and in the moment, and hearing things that are quiet, and or seeing details and being very aware of the environment. I mean, there's actually a neurobiological mechanism where the higher the acetylcholine is, the more input from outside is accepted, and then the lower the acetylcholine is, the more input is processed in the neurons without accepting recurrent processing, where it processes the signals that come out from them and go back into them without accepting signals from the outside. So it's really I get a lot of information from the outside world at a higher bandwidth, I feel like, with the acetylcholine.
That level of self-awareness that you have to be able to say specifically, like, yeah, I can see more in people's faces, or I see flowers in higher definition. It's such an acute and specific observation that I think it's really important for people to hear that stuff, because not everybody has, I think few people have that level of self-awareness, and to hear like, yes, this is what it does for me, and I understand why it's doing that for me because I understand the chemistry behind it, and this is essentially what it does for you as well. What other common improvements, either mentally or physically, do you see from the acetylcholine brain food? Like, tell me more about the muscle contraction.
Okay, well, the way that acetylcholine is very involved in muscle contraction, for instance, in the motor neurons in the brain, they send electrical signals down to the muscles, and those electrical signals release acetylcholine, which goes to the acetylcholine receptors, and that causes muscle contraction. And then acetylcholine esterase breaks that down, and then the acetylcholine gets taken up into the cells again. And the acetylcholine esterase is an interesting enzyme in that it's one of the fastest processing enzymes in the body, because muscle contractions have to be fast. It's about, I believe it's 25,000 molecules per second are broken down by each molecule of acetylcholine. I mean, each acetylcholine esterase. And so that's, so it's very involved in muscle contraction and moving around. And that's why I feel more coordinated. And one thing that's interesting that I've researched is that there are various things that interfere with that. And usually they're things like snake venom or plant toxins, where they block the breakdown of the acetylcholine. The muscles, stay contracted and can't release. It causes convulsions. But then if they interfere with there's other snake venoms and so forth, where they interfere with the activity of acetylcholine, and that causes weakness. And there's particular diseases like autoimmune diseases that attack the acetylcholine receptors, and those also cause weakness over time and so forth. So, yeah,
that's an important thing, and just because you and I both know that almost everybody knows somebody that has an autoimmune disease, and they're on the rise, and whether that's because of glyphosate or vaccines or whatever, and we don't need to take it down that road necessarily today on this episode, but so many people are experiencing autoimmune disease. For people who are suffering from lupus or Crohn's or fibromyalgia, would they benefit from supplementing with acetylcholine brain food?
Well, I can't say that this product cures or prevents or treats a disease.
Of course, of course.
I'm not going to go there, but
Got it.
I mean, I just can tell you what I've seen using it myself and what scientific studies have said.
Sure.
For instance, in some of the ingredients in the product, for instance, alpha GPC, cognitive improvement in mild. There was a study that said that it showed cognitive improvement in mild to moderate Alzheimer's dementia after treatment with the acetylcholine brain precursor alpha GPC. Alpha GPC. There was a study that said alpha GPC augments growth hormone response to and peak produced during resistance exercise and cognitive improvement, mild moderate Alzheimer's disease. So there are a lot of studies I can cite, but I can't say like treats this disease.
No. Yeah, no, and I don't mean that. Treats, no, but yeah, pointing to the studies. I didn't realize that autoimmune disease affected the acetylcholine system.
Right. There's a particular autoimmune disease that affects acetylcholine receptors. It's so in the muscles, and it causes weakness. But that's that's the kind of thing that people should get diagnosed.
Yes.
Yes. Right.
I'm not a doctor.
All right.
Yeah. When do you like to take it?
I take acetylcholine brain food first thing in the morning because it makes me alert, and if taken later in the day, it may interfere with sleep. So that's it's always a good thing. There's some people take acetylcholinesterase inhibitors before they go to sleep, actually, to experience enhanced lucid dreaming. So that's another aspect because it actually prolongs the REM sleep state and modifies it so people can be more aware, apparently. So,
have you experienced personally some increases in lucid dreaming?
I've experimented with galantamine and had some interesting experiences. Galantamine's a little bit. It causes it can cause some serious stomach upset, so it's not something I take on a regular basis. It has to be dosed very carefully. It's a strong substance. Galantamine has an interesting history too because it was used in ancient Greek medicine, and this is a herb because it comes from a plant that they were familiar with. And there's this guy who I think who was talking about the history of this stuff, and he says that in the Odyssey, when Circe turned Odysseus's men into pigs, she used some plant toxin that was similar to scopolamine, which is a anticholinergic, which blocks the activity of acetylcholine, which neurologically basically turns people into kind of zombies, and they don't remember anything, and they are kind of in a delirium, and Odysseus used a plant that may have contained galantamine to prevent coming under Circe's spell. So this is
awesome. Yeah. I love that stuff.
Yeah, it's a great old story. So anyway, that's that's the lucid dreaming aspect of it.
What's the difference? Because I used to take choline, sort of a generic choline, and I want you to explain the difference between acetylcholine and choline, if there is one, in a second. But what I would take, I would buy a generic choline to take before I would do overnight sessions in the float tank. So I would sleep in the float tank for 4 or 5 hours, and I would take a choline with, oh geez, I don't even remember what it was now, but I would take it to induce that lucid dreaming state, and it worked for a while, and I got away from it. But what's the difference between acetylcholine and choline?
Well, acetylcholine is made up of choline and the acetyl moiety of acetyl-CoA. So in the neurons, in cells, acetyl-CoA is combined with choline to make acetylcholine by choline acetyltransferase, and so you need the acetyl-CoA part too. And that can come from the pyruvate dehydrogenase complex, which basically takes glucose and turns it into energy in the mitochondria. It's the acetyl-CoA feeds the Krebs cycle and creates ATP, which is the energy currency of the cell. And that some of that acetyl-CoA actually goes and combines with choline via choline acetyltransferase to make acetylcholine. So choline is, you need it to produce acetylcholine, but it's not 100% of the picture. Now, in acetylcholine brain food, we have vitamin B1, which is used by the pyruvate dehydrogenase complex, and we have pantethine, which is turns into CoA, which is the other part, which is needed to produce acetyl-CoA, and then that combines with, it can either combine with acetyl-L-carnitine or with the choline from alpha GPC to produce. It makes acetyl-CoA from the pyruvate dehydrogenase complex, or it combines directly with acetyl-L-carnitine to produce acetyl-CoA, and that combines with alpha GPC's choline to make acetylcholine. So that's how it works. So it's you got one half of the puzzle, but you don't have the other half. And also just like to talk about Pioni for a little bit.
Yeah.
So the way I came about
this is the little flower we're talking about. Little cute little white peony, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it contains peony foreign, which is an ingredient in this Chinese traditional medicine, shimotu to. I hope I pronounced that right. And it's been shown to improve working memory in animals. So there's been a lot of research recently taking apart Chinese traditional medicine to determine how it works at a molecular biological level. I mean, they know it. They've been using it for thousands of years, and they know it helps cognition. But the actual Western medicine understanding of that, molecular biological understanding, has been researched intensively over the last 20 or 30 years. So, some of the studies on Pioni is that it increases the activity of choline acetyltransferase, which is the enzyme that's used to make acetylcholine, and it's improved performance in rats impaired by scopolamine. So that's the drug that blocks the activity of choline in the brain. It blocks the receptors and usually results in amnesia. And so this is how researchers figure out if something improves the functioning of the choline system and the acetylcholine system in the brain, is they introduce this chemical that degrades it, and then they see if another chemical can reverse, or another herb or natural substance can reverse that effect. So it showed, so they Pioni had a effect of reversing this in these impaired rats, and also it's also it's shown to be an anti-inflammatory, and it prevents brain damage in certain situations, like if there's a brain injury or that kind of thing. If there's a cutoff of blood to areas of the brain. So in rats, you can't do those studies in humans.
No, not okay.
Yeah. So anyway, that's why I chose Pioni.
Yeah.
Because there's so much great information coming out when they take these traditional medicines and they understand their effects from a molecular biological level.
Yeah. I want to take a step back for a second, because I feel like it's important that we, especially with you, I want to want to take full advantage of this conversation because there's so much to dig into. I would love to go back to the brain food line and talk a little bit more individually about each of those and how they're specified. And I'll sort of state it out here, and then we can dig into a little bit more detail. But dopamine brain food is for motivation and following through on goals. Serotonin brain food is for positive mood. GABA brain food is for calming the brain down and emotional labor. Acetylcholine brain food is for creativity, focus, and alertness. And then there's a note down there that you shared with me that says there is more than one dimension to cognition. And I think that that's a really important thing to drive home, that it's not like we just want to get smarter. I mean, we do want to get smarter, but in getting smarter, there are so many different nuances and aspects of cognition, of intellect, of speed, of retention, of all of these things. Can you you pick the one you want to start with, but I would love to hear a little bit more about how you think these can best be used, because when you explained your stack today, you have a little bit of everything, and not surprisingly, and I know that you've been taking, a rich list of stacks for a long time, because you really value performance cognitively, and you've got a busy workload, even as you travel as a digital nomad. You still have stuff that you're working on or reading or interested in. So why don't you pick a brain food and talk a little bit about sort of the motivation for why it was created, and how you think people could best benefit from it.
Okay. Well, I'll start with GABA brain food. And GABA is as I talked about in my previous interview, it's the inhibitory neurotransmitter. It's the transmitter that acts to slow impulses down in the brain. And lack of GABA is associated with with seizures and excessive excitation in the brain by glutamate. For example, an extreme example is alcoholics, because alcohol stimulates GABA, and it does a lot of other things that aren't good for the body. But when the GABA in the brain is excessively stimulated by an agonist that's not natural to the brain, like alcohol, the only thing the brain can figure out how to do is to make the receptors less sensitive, and so that makes the excitation more powerful in the brain, and thus when an alcoholic withdraws, they get excessive excitation, and that can cause brain damage or seizures, that kind of thing. So GABA is essentially acting to slow those signals down and to control the activation of the brain. Now, where that comes in handy for somebody who's just trying to optimize their neurochemistry is that it makes it easier to interact with people in situations where there may be some awkwardness or some uncomfortableness. For instance, if somebody was doing cold calls or handling customer service for a cable company, or just
totally
trying to be nice to people when they aren't being nice back, or for instance, if you're if you're working in some sort of capacity with the general public, and so forth. And also it acts as a squelch knob on thoughts that are going through the brain. So if there's a lot of anxiety, it can calm that down. So only the most important thoughts, instead of all the background worries, rise to the surface. It's also good for sleeping, for quieting the brain down for that. And so, the GABA is, and it's also in GABA brain food. I use actual GABA with some extra stuff to increase nitric oxide, which in some animal studies has been shown to allow GABA to pass the blood-brain barrier. And so that it's really important that I'm just using GABA because the brain has a lot of systems for removing excess GABA from the brain instead of making the GABA receptors less sensitive. And there's all these other GABA receptor agonists that are sort of notorious in the cognitive enhancement community, like, for instance, Phenibut, that has a lot of horror stories with it because people take it and they think, oh, this is great. I feel awesome. And then they take it for a while and then their brain lowers the sensitivity of their GABA receptors and then they stop taking it and they don't feel good at all. So it's, so in designing a GABA supplement that I'm going to take on a regular basis, I'm not going to have to worry about, like, did I take, can I take this every day and so forth. I made sure that we're actually using GABA as the GABA receptor agonist, which is what the brain's neurochemistry knows how to work with. It knows how to process it, remove it from the brain, and thus it doesn't downregulate receptors in response to excess GABA. So that's what GABA Brain Food is all about.
I want to echo that one point. One of the points that you made about customer service. I mean, most of us work in customer service in some way, shape, or form, and most of us work with coworkers and people that probably drive us crazy. And for people who feel overwhelmed by the interpersonal load of just working at your job or dealing with the public, GABA could be an amazing, instead of drinking whiskey at your desk.
Don't do that.
Don't do that. Instead of smoking joints at your desk all day, GABA could be a really powerful supplement for people to take so that they can be their best and do a good job without being overloaded by ornery people. I think that's phenomenal. Thank you for explaining in that way. Okay, take us down the brain food path one step further. What's the next one you want to tackle?
Okay, well, serotonin brain food is a supplement I designed to specifically increase the amount of tryptophan that goes down the tryptophan hydroxylase pathway to serotonin and melatonin, as opposed to the other pathway, which is the chyrenic acid pathway, which is has some negative effects. And that's there's actually there's a theoretical model where stress, increased cortisol, causes more tryptophan to go down the chyrenic acid pathway, which means that more stress thus causes depression. So in order to prevent that, I included rhodiola, which has a strong ability to control cortisol in certain animal experiments. And that way, it's the more tryptophan goes into producing serotonin, which makes everybody feel really good. And and that's that supplement. It's pretty straightforward. People are really familiar with serotonin pharmaceuticals, and
right.
In my opinion, it's in my experience, it's a similar kind of thing where the moods improves my mood and just makes me feel good and content with life and less fearful. I mean, that's my personal experience with that. And generally, serotonin is about mood and just feelings of well-being and lack of fear. I'd say that's primarily its major way it acts. Now, that's a lot simpler than to explain the GABA because people are more familiar with that because of all the drugs that have kind of used a serotogenic mechanism of action over the years.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel the same way, and for me, as my experience with taking the serotonin brain food is that when nothing else is going right, when nothing else is working, um, the serotonin brain food is there um, to bring me back into the moment, to bring me back into presence. And, as a lifelong meditator, I've been meditating since I was a kid, and my level of presence, my level of mindfulness and being able to tap in is one of my strongest attributes. And when that's not firing, I don't really feel like myself. When I can't be present, when I'm agitated or fearful or um, not being not being fully engaged in an optimistic way with the world, I feel not like myself. And no level of kale shakes that I drink, or yoga that I do, or sleep that I get, or hugs that I give or get can bring me to that level. Then I use the serotonin brain food as like a failsafe. And when when you've got two podcasts and four businesses and two kids, like I do, there's a lot that can go wrong. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of people depending on me, and there's a lot of pressure. And when that gets to be a little bit much, I find that I usually take the serotonin brain food about halfway through the day. Like I fast the first half of the day. I take my stacks in the morning. So I take my stacks in the morning with fatty coffee, and then I do my work, and I'm most productive the first half of the day. And sometimes by 1 or 2 o'clock, I've put out 3 or 4 fires. I've had 3 conversations that I didn't enjoy, and I've done 6 pieces of paperwork that I despised. And by then I'm a little bit edgy. And then that's when I usually take the serotonin brain food, because then I can start to integrate a little bit better, prepare to kind of be home in the afternoon and be present with my family and my kids and be positive, because that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Okay, what's next? Where you want to go now, Abelard?
I guess the last one is dopamine brain food.
Yeah.
And dopamine brain food is really about get up and go. And, it's very interesting that now, CILTEP, the mechanism of action that I proposed, increasing Krebs activity. There are some studies that suggest that it increases tyrosine hydroxylase activity, which means it pulls in more tyrosine into the dopamine system. So that can over time can lead to some dopamine precursors that are from food, can lead to depletion of that. And if I've been taking high doses of CILTEP for a while, sometimes the following day I feel really good, but I'm not super motivated. And if I take those precursors in dopamine brain food, that it's like somebody turned on a light and okay, we're going. We can let's go.
Yeah, right.
And dopamine brain food contains phenylalanine and tyrosine. And phenylalanine, besides it converts into tyrosine, but it also produces PEA, which is it's the body's natural TAR1 receptor, which is also to explain what that is. That's also what like Adderall does, but it's very well unlike it's kind of like alcohol and GABA, and it's since it's the body's since alcohol is not the body's natural GABA agonist, the body doesn't reacts to it in a strange way, and since amphetamine isn't the body's natural TAR1 agonist, it also reacts to it in a less than optimal way, in my opinion, in my humble opinion.
Yeah.
So the phenylalanine converts into PEA, and that gets broken down by MAOB rather quickly. But it also converts into tyrosine, and tyrosine converts into L-DOPA, and then to dopamine, and then to norepinephrine, epinephrine, and so it basically starts off the whole process of producing dopamine, which is related to motivation, goal-oriented behavior, drive, what dopamine does is it creates these pathways in the brain through long-term potentiation that kind of create habits and reinforce those, and also allow very strong goal-directed behavior. So that's what I take it for is, I've got a project to do. I've got a whole bunch of stuff I got to do. I got to get started and keep moving. And that's essentially what it was designed for. Also on the back end, there is, B12, methylfolate, TMG to, run the SAM cycle to produce SAMe, and basically that's a way that the body produces a lot of endogenous neurotransmitters and breaks them down. For instance, creatine and a couple other ones. So that finishes off the breakdown and transformation of initially tyrosine into dopamine, into epinephrine, norepinephrine, into into the waste products eventually. So it kind of participates at most of the stages of dopamine metabolism.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a little dopamine brain food story from yesterday. And like I mentioned, I don't take all of these every day. I take them based on what I have to do that day. And yesterday I was, you can probably hear it in my voice, but I'm kind of coming off of a cold. But it was sunny for like 6 hours yesterday here in Seattle. And that is something to celebrate in March. If it's sunny for more than like a split second, you've got to go outside and do yard work. There's things to do. And so as the sun started to come out in sort of the mid-morning, I took 4 dopamine brain food on top of my standard, my standard stack in the morning. And all of a sudden, almost sort of unbeknownst to me, I'm dressed and I'm tying up my boots, getting ready to go outside and mow the lawn. And I had this moment of like, wait a minute, how did I get here? Like, I'm just doing it. Well, awesome. All right, here I go. I guess I'm mowing the lawn. and I found that dopamine, the dopamine brain food provided just a little nudge, just like a soft, like a kick in the butt, just a soft kick in the butt to go do stuff, to go do the things, the goal-oriented activities, like you mentioned. That's an interesting way to put it, but that's exactly what it is. Like, I need to do this. I should do this. I've got to finish it. And here I am. I'm now mowing the lawn. And it was really nice. It was, those sorts of moments, when you notice that you're doing what you should be doing, are also deeply rewarding. There's this like reward loop that happens when you do what you should be doing. And whether it's aided by dopamine brain food or CILTEP or whatever, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter whether you were taking nootropics to help you get there. What matters is that you got your chores done and you can just continue to perform optimally. I don't know. I figured I'd share that.
Oh yeah. Well, what I always say about CILTEP is it doesn't so much increase the level of dopamine in between the neurons. It makes that dopamine do more by potentiating the signals released by the dopamine receptors when they are activated. It makes those signals last longer, and that's the theory behind how it works. So it's not it's not pushy like an ADD drug where it's more. In my opinion, it keeps the brain more in control of what it's doing, but it enhances the things that it decides to do, the motivation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Now, one thing that's I kind of find interesting about having this multi-dimensional approach to cognition is it's for understanding personally how my brain works, very it's very interesting. I can see like this is this, how the serotonin part of my brain works. This is how the dopamine part works. This is how the GABA part works. The acetylcholine part. And I used to take the Braverman
Yeah.
exam. I had like a little web app I built that where I could take it all the time, and I would get really into, and then I almost memorized the questions, so I could just ask myself that
Wait a
at any
minute.
time.
Wait a minute. Isn't there like how many questions are there?
Well, I didn't memorize all of
Oh, I
them,
was
but
gonna
I
say.
memorized, enough of them that I, I could kind of ask myself those questions and sort of know what I needed or what was doing what in my brain at the time. And I just felt it was for attaining like deeper self knowledge. And so in a more scientific sort of way. I mean, that's sort of how I think. I'm very reductionist, and I know more. Some people are more spiritual, and that's great. It's everybody understands the world in their own way, but I sort of like to understand things at a molecular biological level if I can, and it just allowed me to understand things in those neurochemical dimensions. It allowed me to better understand myself and my moods and how I respond and to certain situations and what I need in those situations neurochemically.
I think I would assume that most of our listeners know what the Braverman test is, but can you explain it to them just in case?
Yeah, yeah. The Braverman test originated in this book by Dr. Eric Braverman called The Edge Effect, and it's a book that is centered around these tests, which are a dominance test. Are you dopamine dominant, acetylcholine dominant, serotonin dominant, or GABA dominant? And then another test for deficiencies. What aspects of your neurochemistry are deficient? And then it gives recommendations and so forth. And it's a book that had a lot of a pretty strong effect on me. And the test is, it takes like 5 minutes to take, and it's a good way to kind of determine what's currently going on in one's mind and neurochemically. I mean, it's kind of speculative,
Sure.
but it's not. I don't think there's been any like rigorous scientific studies on it, but it's been helpful for me to understand, my neurochemistry and what's going on, and just understand my moods and so forth. It's kind of like it's just a tool that I find very helpful in understanding what's going on and what I need, and just myself in general, like self-knowledge in almost like a spiritual sense.
Yeah, for sure. Know thyself, man. That's all that matters. Give us an example of like one or two of the questions on the Braverman test.
Okay. For instance, one of the questions for serotonin is, if you have a deficiency, it'd be like, I feel fearful. My imagination takes over. For acetylcholine, like I don't feel creative. I'm obsessed with my deficiencies, and dopamine is that you don't you let other people make decisions for you're fine letting other people make decisions for you. You really rarely take the initiative, and GABA is things like I do things just because I think they'd be fun, or I tend to act out and make a scene. That is, GABA is also related to like impulse control, that kind of thing. So it's, that's why it's good for things like customer service or dealing with coworkers, because then when they, get on my nerves, they don't, it doesn't make me feel like I have to react. I just absorb that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just deal with it.
Right.
I think anybody who's listening, if you're curious about, I mean, who doesn't love taking tests about, self-directed tests online to figure out where you're at, whether it's your Ayurvedic, uh, uh, what was it, dosha? You familiar with the doshas, Abelard?
Well, I'm not super familiar with Ayurvedic, except for their medicines and mainly from like a scientific, medical study perspective.
Yeah. The
Yeah,
the dosha the dosha is like, and we're going down a little, just a quick rabbit hole really quick.
yeah,
So the dosha is a um there's three doshas, pitta, vata, and kapha, and these three doshas are like symbolic of kind of who you are, right? And your sort of personality styles that are attached to this Ayurvedic knowledge that is esoteric in nature, which I love. But taking these tests, like taking a test for your dosha or doing the Braverman test to try to figure out, asking questions about like, I let people make decisions for me, yes or no. Answering those questions really does give you an idea of where you're at, and maybe if it's just that day, or if it's sort of a general sense, like in my life, I let other people make decisions for me. Well, kiddo, there's a good chance that you may be a little bit low in dopamine, um, and so forth. So I figured it was cool to share that with people. You should go take a dosha quiz when you get a second, Abelard.
yeah. Well, uh, yeah, I think it's the brave those tests and just the thinking about breaking cognition into these different aspects is, it's a little bit like tradition, Chinese or traditional medicine, where you have this hot and cold and damp and all that stuff. But it's a little bit, in my opinion. I mean, Chinese traditional medicine is great, and a lot of people benefit from it. But it's a little bit more of an updated version of that, I think, for maybe a better understanding of neurobiology. So I think it has use in sort of understanding these things from a without being able to like put probes in human brains and like measure neurochemistry, that you couldn't basically do. It wouldn't be possible because
Not yet, at least.
not yet. I mean, sometime in the future, maybe they'll invent an MRI that can like see, the state of brain chemistry in a person without hurting them. Like, but then that would be incredible. But we're not. I don't think we're there yet.
No, not as far as I know. You would know, trust me, right? Like
Yeah.
you would know.
Yeah.
If anybody would know, you would.
Right.
Um, so what can you tell me about Russian peptides?
Oh, okay. Well, you know, I have I go to a lot of these longevity conferences, and they're very fascinating. People are trying to sincerely live forever and spending a lot of money and scientific effort trying to figure that out. And I talk to people there, and I get things recommended to me to look into. And one of the things I've been looking into are these Russian peptides that apparently the way they work, and this is very speculative kind of stuff, is they figured out that if they extracted from organs of like young farm animals certain low molecular weight peptides, that these could be used to epigenetically activate mechanisms in organs to regenerate them somehow. And this is apparently a project of the Russian military in the 80s.
Nice.
And now and now they're out there. And it's funny because they're from farm, cows and pigs or whatever, their organ meats, and so it's actually natural.
Yeah.
But it regenerates. It's supposed to regenerate organs, and they have various ones out there for different organs, like the thymus, which brain, the testicles, the heart. There's one for blood vessels and muscles, and so I've been taking these, and I think I've been it's sort of hard to really definitively say like they work, but I think I've been getting some beneficial effects. It's it's definitely speculative stuff, but there have been a couple of studies, I think, on the thymus and the thymus peptide, I think, was studied, and so that's interesting as far as, because that's one of the things that degrades when people get older is the immune system.
Yeah,
So that's an important thing to maintain.
yeah. Well, that's why we've got the mycoimmune. That's why we've got the mycoimmune. Boost that immune system, and float tanks to get in the dark. Have you floated, Abelard?
Yeah, I floated.
Oh, sweet, cool.
Yeah, that's a really a lot of magnesium.
Yeah.
It goes into the body transdermally, doesn't it?
Yeah, magnesium sulfate. Yeah.
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 And at these anti-aging conferences, it's really interesting to see the different theories of aging, because there's not just one.
Right. Telomeres, right? Isn't it all about telomeres?
Well, there are some people who believe that it's all about telomeres, and you just solve the telomere problem, and that's it. And then there's some like Aubrey de Grey, most famously the SENS project, which has all these different aspects of aging, these types of damage that occur to the body as we age, and then since they've broken it down into these different aspects, they have different programs to address each one and scientific initiatives. And then there's epigenetic theories of aging, which say that aging is just a programmed stage of like puberty. And so if you could just prevent it, you'd prevent aging.
Yeah.
That's actually epigenetic changes that genes are turned on and off based on some sort of internal biological clock, that if you could just manipulate that clock, it would fix everything. Yeah, you've heard of that when they were studying resveratrol's anti-aging activity.
Yeah,
they found that the anti-aging activity of resveratrol was mimicked by synthetic PDE4 inhibitors. So, and as you know, that's how CILTEP works. So
right.
I wrote an article about this. I think you can find it in the Natural Stacks archives about all the evidence that said that there was that PDE4 inhibitors were linked to anti-aging and how that works. So.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit more. Let me ask this question too. I feel like the term biohacking is being overused now. Do you still use the term? Do you have a preference? Do you care? Do you like, where are you at on the term itself?
Well, the word hacking just, has a lot of, I mean, for people familiar with the computer culture, it has a positive connotation, but people who aren't into programming and Silicon Valley computer culture, it sounds kind of weird.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it's a little aggressive.
Yeah, it is a little aggressive. So, but it's a word that's come to mean pretty much that's come to have a useful meaning. So I'm fine with it.
Yeah, for me, it does the trick. For me, it's the best term for this. I mean, because you can't say, nutritional optimization or like, I'm a cognitive optimizer. Like, no, I mean, that's clunky. It's called, biohacking puts in the whole. I like Dave Asprey's. I don't remember what it is now, but I like his definition of biohacking. It's like the internal or external, making adjustments to the internal or external environment to optimize the physical mental performance or something like that. I think that was cool. But given
Yeah. Well, and it's a cooler term than say like functional medicine,
yeah,
right?
for
Which is
sure.
biohacking and functional medicine have a lot in common in that um, functional medicine is looking at the why, not just the symptoms.
Right.
For various, but that's more about treating diseases, and biohacking is more about being better than well. Optimization.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Speaking of biohacking, what other sorts of biohacking projects are you into these days?
I'm getting into fasting. I did some 5-day fasts because I'm really interested in the autophagy benefits.
Yeah.
That basically the old cells that aren't working properly, the senescent cells, sorry, um, are can be recycled, or sometimes um, the cellular junk can be cleaned out when the autophagy kicks in. Usually after about 3 days, I think is the threshold. So I did 2 5-day fasts with a meal in between, and that was pretty
Dude,
intense.
what? What? Whoa. Hold the train. You did a 5-day fast, had a meal, and did
Uh,
another 5-day fast?
yeah,
Just water only, or water and tea
well,
and
electrolytes.
okay.
Yeah, my I take these NUUN noon electrolyte capsules, and all they have like 5 calories or something, um, with water, and then also magnesium, potassium, and salt.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, that was pretty intense. I had to end that at the end of it because it was it was starting to feel a little weak. So
Yeah.
yeah, but that was intense. The first 2 days of fasting are always really hard for me. But I want just experiment with this stuff. Also,
Dude, I didn't know you were so hardcore, Abelard. That is hard. That's hardcore. I've done 3-day fasts before. I've done 3-day fasts before. I've done like a Ramadan style fasting for like a full moon cycle, not eating during daylight. I've done that before.
yeah,
Um, just for just self discipline. More for like sort of spiritual understanding. But damn, dude, I'm impressed. That's awesome.
yeah. It's funny how when I fast on about the I can watch cooking videos on YouTube for hours and hours.
It sounds like torture.
No, it's fun.
Oh
I
man.
just have a whole new relationship and appreciation for food.
Oh
Um,
yeah, totally.
yeah, really makes me realize, how much I enjoy food.
Yeah. When you don't
Uh,
have it for 5 days.
right, right. Also, I've been investigating detoxification um, for heavy metals and persistent organic pollutants, like all these PCBs and these fire retardants they have in furniture and carpets and things like that. These, all this indoor air pollution and this stuff that doesn't leave the body easily. Um, and that's been kind of interesting. It's it's kind of a modern problem that we get all these toxic situations. That and high intensity interval training.
Wait, can
Um,
can I can I stop you there for a second? Tell
sure.
tell me a little bit about what you've been doing for detoxification for environmental toxins.
Oh, yeah. There's this product, metal free spray, that has various things processed from algae that removes heavy metals from the body. And I've been doing some detoxification rounds with that, and it seems to work. Uh, seems to. I mean, I've had. I don't want to get too much into my personal medical problems, but in the two one of the reasons I kind of started a soul journey back in the mid 2000s, even before I invented CILTEP, was I had some pretty bad ADD issues and so forth, and one thing that improved those a lot was going on a heavy metal detoxification regimen. So that's something I investigate on a regular basis. Yeah. When I was at the Bulletproof conference, this guy had this, who was selling this stuff, had this device that actually measures the micrograms of mercury in the breath and stuff. And so,
Whoa. I've never heard of that before.
Yeah. So so these detoxification sprays are, I think they're helpful.
Do you ever mess with iodine or silver or anything like that for detoxification?
No. I mainly one thing if you have a heavy metal problem, if you think you have a heavy metal problem, you should get tested for it and go through a regimen with a functional medicine doctor or something, or a naturopath or something like that. Traditional doctors don't really do it that much, from what I've seen.
Yeah. What was the source of your heavy metals when you had them? Do you remember?
I wouldn't really. I don't know if I want to get into speculating about that.
Okay.
It could have been anything. From growing up in a house with 100-year-old plumbing, or having metal fillings, mercury metal fillings. I don't. It could have been.
It wasn't like a tuna fish addiction or anything like that.
Well, that happens to people if they eat fish that are really high up on the food chain, like swordfish and that kind of thing. On a regular basis, that can build up.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the other Natural Stacks guys, now that they're in Seattle, go to this one sushi place in Seattle. It's called Shiro's, and I swear they eat there 3 times a week. And I keep telling them, you guys are gonna get heavy metal poisoning with the amount of sushi that you eat. And they're like, you know what, man? It doesn't matter. It's worth it. It's worth it. I'll keep eating it. It's too good. I can't stop.
Well, you should eat things that are lower on the food chain. If you like fish, salmon or mackerel, sardines.
Yeah.
Little fish, not big fish at the top of the food chain.
Right. No more blue whale croquettes for dinner. No more. Sorry.
No more. Yeah.
corny dad joke. Sorry.
Right.
So, what else? What other sort of biohacking projects? You started to talk about the high intensity interval training, which is something that I'm super passionate about too. What are you doing for exercise in there?
Oh, well, along with all my weight training I do, and I got this muscle anatomy book, and it lists all these various exercises and which muscles they activate. And so I went through that and it's kind of made separate exercises for each muscle group. Which actually I made it so that one exercise stimulated a lot of different muscle groups, for example, and that they didn't overlap.
Sure.
And then for my cardio, there's a study that said that you can actually get meaningful changes in the cardiovascular, like VO2 max, and that from a 10-minute high intensity training. So 2 minutes. Yeah. So what I do is I do a 2-minute warm up at 4 to 3.5 to 4 miles an hour, and then I run for 30 seconds at 10 miles an hour, and then 2 minutes back to 3.5 to 4, and then run for 30 seconds at 10 miles an hour, then 2 minutes, and then run for 30 seconds, 10, and then cool down for the rest of it.
Right.
Yeah. So it's fun running at 10 miles an hour, even if it's only for 30 seconds. and I've been slowly moving that up.
Nice.
I guess if I got up to 15 miles an hour, and then for 30 seconds, hey, if I could do that for 4 minutes, I got a 4-minute mile, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah.
So I'm slowly kind of edging up on the running there. So that's what I've been doing for high intensity interval training.
Nice.
Yeah. Do you do you do high intensity interval?
I do. Yeah, I do. I do wind sprints. I'll do 10 100-meter sprints and call it. Or I'll do a combination kettlebell exercises. So I'll do, like a snatch into a sumo squat, into a like shoulder press. So combining kettlebell movements to do, and then just go hard, just bust my ass for for 15 or 20 minutes and call it and just be done with it. It's because I'm busy. It's because I know that it's boosting my testosterone. I know that it's that it's putting on muscle, and it's just convenient. It's fun. I'd rather go really hard for a very short period of time than I just don't like running. I just don't. I never have. I'm a lifelong athlete. I'm a soccer player, and I just hate to run for no reason. So if I'm going to do it, I'm just going to do it and get it done. But yeah, that's how I like to do it too. What about microdosing?
Microdosing.
Yeah, you have an opinion about it?
A long time ago in my youth, I played around with that stuff, and it was fun. But these days, I tend to avoid anything that's like not legal. I just don't. I like things that I can be able to take anytime and on a regular basis, and I think that's just a good way to go. I've looked into these mechanisms of action of hallucinogens, and it's if you've ever looked at like, okay, what receptors in the brain does LSD push? It's like everything,
right?
All at once. It's like you got this big old organ and you push all the keys all at the same time.
Right.
Yeah. So it does. Yeah, it certainly does a lot of stuff in the brain. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I'm in Seattle, and I have a ton of friends that work in tech and startups, Amazon or Microsoft, and it is shocking how common it is. I mean, the people that you never would have expected are asking me about. I mean, I own a float center, and I talk openly about entheogens and psychedelics and their uses and my experiences and stuff like that. And so obviously I sort of attract that sort of conversation, but I'm consistently surprised by the number of people that are doing it and the type of people that are interested in doing it, because at 0.2 to 0.3 grams of cubenzes, psilocybin cubenzes, you can, it's a non-perceivable effect. It's like barely perceivable. It's like this widening of the vision a little bit. It's this opening of the heart. It's a greater understanding of sort of complex issues. It's a fascinating approach, and just because there's a ton of mushrooms growing up here in the Northwest too, I think that's part of it. But I figured I'd run it by you.
Well, as far as psychedelics, to me, the best way to describe psychedelics is I'm awake, but I'm dreaming. So it feels like I'm at home, I'm in bed, I'm sleeping, I'm having a dream, but it's reality. So, that's kind of like what they mean to me when I took them, like when I was in my early 20s and stuff.
Yeah.
But as far as like research chemicals, I think some things I've tried that I've gotten a lot of benefit out of that aren't, for kind of thing you want to take every day. Was PRL 853 was pretty intense. The PRL 853, which was this substance that they did some medical studies on, I think back in the 70s, and it increased number span dramatically. That's the amount of, if somebody repeats a string of numbers, how many can they remember?
Right.
Yeah, it's a little weird to take because it's kind of caustic. Like people who take it sublingually, they report that it rots their teeth if they take it regularly.
Ooh.
So yeah, I mean, we're talking about like, we're comparing this to like, psilocybin or LSD or whatever. So,
Yeah.
kind of going out there. So it's not the kind of thing. I mean, I would take it like maybe, if in very certain circumstances where I needed to remember stuff very, very well. And then Unifiram, which is kind of like a stronger one of the racetams, that works really well too. Those are ones I've taken recently. Also, methylene blue. I mean, I take methylene blue on a regular basis for anti-aging benefits.
Yeah.
And also, there was a study that said it was very beneficial in skin anti-aging. Also, it's there's a company that's working on a slightly tweaked version of methylene blue, so it's patentable, and they're entering stage 3 clinical trials for Alzheimer's. And also, it has strong mitochondrial enhancing effects. So it's great as a pre-workout, in my opinion. And the way I take really low doses of it. So the way I take it is I put 2 drops of the Blue Brain Boost, and that's about 1 milligram in a liter bottle.
Oh wow!
So yeah. So that works out to about 50 micrograms. And I pour it into my hands. I take it transdermally because it's very antibacterial, antimicrobial. So if I drink it, it'll kill a lot of my gut bacteria. So and also it has skin benefits. So I take it transdermally. I just rub it over my arms and over my face. And,
diluted to that amount too.
Yeah. And on a regular basis, I can feel it right away. So
what does it feel like?
It just feels like a breath of like, have you ever inhaled like pure oxygen? It feels like that. It just feels really energizing, like a breath of really pure fresh air.
Cool. Is it expensive?
Yeah. No, it's super cheap.
Really?
Yeah, because the amounts being taken are so small, and It's a pretty simple thing to manufacture. You just have to get pharmaceutical grade. I wouldn't, whatever they're selling in fish stores is not something you want. That's not good. There's certain vendors online that sell pharmaceutical grade. So, and also, so it has this anti-Alzheimer's benefit, also, anti-skin aging. So, mitochondrial enhancement, and the anti-Alzheimer's benefits that's the trials for that are like over 100 milligrams, I think. But and it was traditionally, I mean, it's one of the oldest synthetic drugs that was used for malaria at very high doses long time ago. But at these really small doses, you don't have the issues of things turning blue. Like yeah. Or it's kind of hard. I mean, I think it's not very popular because it's really hard to dose in the appropriate amount. And if if it gets on anything, it'll stain it blue, and it takes a while to clean it off.
And then you're Beast from the X-Men, and then everybody's freaked out.
Yeah,
start hanging from the chandelier by your feet.
Yeah, so I'd say that. But I take that on a regular basis. At small dosages, it's not. It doesn't cause a lot of issues for me, at least.
Well, we take this train, we pull this train home into the station. Anything else that we didn't touch on about the acetylcholine brain food that you wanna maybe bring back up, or anything that you think people should know, or anything that
Oh,
yeah.
oh well. Since we were talking about the racetams, I just wanted to bring up that there's a common conventional wisdom that racetams should be taken with an acetylcholine precursor, or and I did some research in that and into that, and there was some studies that said racetams increase acetylcholine release, and that piracetam and choline are highly synergistic, and piracetam also diminishes acetylcholine levels. Because it may use them up, for example. And so, as far as acetylcholine to take with acetylcholine precursor to take with piracetam, I think in my experience, acetylcholine brain foods worked pretty well. So I just like to take, since we've been talking about that, I'd bring it up.
Yeah, no, I think that's important for people to know because, again, our audience is sharp, and they're going to be tracking all of this. And I assume that many of the listeners have, if they're not taking, some of the racetams or any of the racetams, they've done it before. Well, I think that does it, man. It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. Thanks for taking time away from your vacation, or your digital journeying, your digital gypsyhood to chime in for this conversation, Abelard. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for the conversation.
You betcha, man. Talk to you soon.